John. The courtyard rang to the sound of swords. Under black wool, boiled leather and mail, sweat trickled icily down John's chest as he pressed the attack. Gren stumbled backward, defending himself clumsily. When he raised his sword, John went underneath it with a sweeping blow that crunched against the back of the other boy's leg and sent him staggering. Gren's downcut was answered by an overhand that dented his helm. When he tried a side swing, John swept aside his blade and slammed a mailed forearm into his chest. Gren lost his footing and sat down hard in the snow. John knocked his sword from his fingers with a slash to his wrist that brought a cry of pain. "Enough!" Sir Alister Thorne had a voice with an edge like Valyrian steel. Gren cradled his hand. "The bastard broke my wrist." "The bastard hamstrung you, opened your empty skull, and cut off your head, or would have if these blades had an edge. It's fortunate for you that the watch needs stable boys as well as rangers." Sir Alister gestured at Geron and Toad. "Get the Oryx on its feet, he has funeral arrangements to make." John took off his helm as the other boys were pulling Gren to his feet. The frosty morning air felt good on his face. He leaned on his sword, drew a deep breath, and allowed himself a moment to savour the victory. "That is a long sword, not an old man's cane," Sir Alister said sharply. "Are your legs hurting, Lord Snow?" John hated that name, a mockery that Sir Alister had hung on him the first day he came to practice. The boys had picked it up, and now he heard it everywhere. He slid the long sword back into its scabbard. "No," he replied. Thorne strode beside him, crisp black leathers whispering faintly as he moved on. He was a compact man of 50 years, spare and hard, with grey in his black hair and eyes like chips of onyx. "The truth now," he commanded. "I'm tired," John admitted. His arm burned from the weight of the long sword, and he was starting to feel his bruises now the fight was done. "What you are is weak." "I won." "No, the Oryx lost." One of the other boys sniggered. John knew better than to reply. He had beaten everyone that Sir Alister had sent against him, yet it gained him nothing. The Master-at-Arms served up only derision. Thorne hated him, John had decided. Of course, he hated the other boys even worse. "That will be all," Thorne told them. "I can only stomach so much ineptitude in one day. If the others ever come for us, I pray they have archers, 'cause you lot are not fit for nothing more than arrow fodder." John followed the rest back to the armoury, walking alone. He often walked alone here. There were almost 20 in the group he trained with, yet not one could he call a friend. Most were 2 or 3 years his senior, yet not one was half the fighter Rob had been at 14. Daron was quick but afraid of being hit. Pip used his sword like a dagger. Geron was weak as a girl. Gren slow and clumsy. Halder's blows were brutally hard, but he ran right into your attacks. The more time he spent with them, the more John despised them. Inside, John hung sword and scabbard from a hook on the stone wall, ignoring the others around him. Methodically he began to strip off his mail, leather, and sweat-soaked woolens. Chunks of coal burned in iron braziers at either end of the long room, but John found himself shivering. The chill was always with him here. In a few years he would forget what it was like to be warm. The wariness came on him suddenly, as he donned the rough-spun blacks that were their everyday wear. He sat on a bench, his fingers fumbling with the fastenings on his cloak. "So cold," he thought, remembering the warm halls of Winterfell, where the hot waters ran through the walls like blood through a man's body. There was scant warmth to be found in Castle Black. The walls were cold here, and the people colder. No one had told him the Night's Watch would be like this. No one except Tyrion Lannister. The dwarf had given him the truth on the road north, but then it had been too late. John wondered if his father had known what the war would be like. He must have, he thought. That only made it hurt the worse. Even his uncle had abandoned him in this cold place at the end of the world. Up here, the genial Benjen Stark he had known became a different person. He was First Ranger, and he spent most his days and nights with Lord Commander Mormont and Maester Aemon and the other high officers, while John was given over to the less-than-tender charge of Sir Alister Thorne. 3 days after their arrival, John had heard that Benjen Stark was to lead a half-dozen men on a ranging into the haunted forest. That night he sought out his uncle in the great timbered common hall and pleaded to go with him. Benjen refused him curtly. "This is not Winterfell," he told him as he cut his meat with fork and dagger. "On the wall, a man only gets what he earns. You're no ranger, John, only a green boy with the smell of summer still on you. Stupidly, John had argued. I'll be 15 on my name day, he said. Almost a man grown. Benjamin Stark frowned. A boy you are, and a boy you'll remain until Sir Alistair says you are fit to be a man of the Night's Watch. If you thought your Stark blood would win you easy favours, you're wrong. We put aside our old families when we swear our vows. Your father will always have a place in my heart, but these are my brothers now. He gestured with his dagger at the men around them, all the hard, cold men in black. John rose at dawn the next day to watch his uncle leave. One of his rangers, a big burly man, sang a bawdy song as he saddled his garron, his breath streaming in the cold morning air. Ben Stark smiled at that, but he had no smile for his nephew. How often must I tell you no, John? We'll speak when I return. As he watched his uncle lead his horse into the tunnel, John had remembered the things that Tyrion Lannister had told him on the King's Road, and in his mind's eye he saw Ben Stark lying dead, his blood red on the snow. The thought made him sick. What was he becoming? Afterward he sought out Ghost in the loneliness of his cell and buried his face in his thick white fur. If he must be alone, he would make solitude his armour. Castle Black had no godswood, only a small sept and a drunken septon, but John could not find it in him to pray to any gods, old or new. If they were real, he thought, they were as cruel and implacable as winter. He missed his true brothers. Little Rickon, bright eyes shining as he begged for a sweet. Robb, his rival and best friend and constant companion. Bran, stubborn and curious, always wanting to follow and join in whatever John and Robb were doing. He missed the girls, too, even Sansa, who never called him anything but my half-brother, since she was old enough to understand what bastard meant. And Arya, he missed her more than Robb, skinny little thing that she was, all scraped knees and tangled hair and torn clothes, so fierce and wilful. Arya never seemed to fit, no more than he had. Yet she could always make John smile. He would give anything to be with her now, to muss up her hair once more and watch her make a face, to hear her finish a sentence with him. You broke my wrist, bastard boy. John lifted his eyes at the sullen voice. Gren loomed over him, thick of neck and red of face, with 3 of his friends behind him. He knew Todder, a short, ugly boy with an unpleasant voice. The recruits all called him Toad. The other 2 were the ones Yoren had brought north with them, John remembered. Rapers taking down in the fingers. He'd forgotten their names. He hardly ever spoke to them if he could help it. They were brutes and bullies without a thimble of honour between them. John stood up. I'll break the other one for you if you ask nicely. Gren was 16 and a head taller than John. All 4 of them were bigger than he was, but they did not scare him. He'd beaten every one of them in the yard. Maybe we'll break you, one of the rapers said. Try. John reached back for his sword, but one of them grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. You make us look bad, complained Toad. You looked bad before I ever met you, John told him. The boy who had his arm jerked upward on him, hard. Pain lanced through him, but John did not cry out. Toad stepped close. The little lordling has a mouth on him, he said. He had pig eyes, small and shiny. Is that your mummy's mouth, bastard? Was she some whore? Tell us her name. Maybe I had her a time or two. He laughed. John twisted like an eel and slammed a heel down across the instep of the boy holding him. There was a sudden cry of pain and he was free. He flew at Toad, knocked him backward over a bench, and landed on his chest with both hands on his throat, slamming his head against the packed earth. The 2 from the fingers pulled him off, throwing him roughly to the ground. Gren began to kick at him. John was rolling away from the blows when a booming voice now cut through the gloom of the armory. Stop this! No! John pulled himself to his feet. Donal Noy stood glowering at them. The yard is for fighting, the armour said. Keep your quarrels out of my armory, or I'll make them my quarrels. You won't like that. Toad sat on the floor, gingerly feeling the back of his head. His fingers came away bloody. He tried to kill me. It's true, I saw it, said one of the rapers. He broke my wrist, Gren said again, holding it out to Noy for inspection. The armourer gave the offered wrist the briefest of glances. A bruise, Perhaps a sprain. Maester Eamon will give you a salve. Go with him, Todder, the head wants looking after. The rest of you, return to your cells. Not you, Snow. You stay. John sat heavily on the log wooden bench as the others left, oblivious to the looks they gave him, the silent promises of future retribution. His arm was throbbing. The watch has need of every man it can get, Donald Noyes said when they were alone. Even men like Toad. You won't win any honours killing him. John's anger flared. He said my mother was... A whore, I heard him. What of it? Lord Eddard Stark was not a man to sleep with whores, John said icily. His honour did not prevent him from fathering a bastard, did it? John was cold with rage. Can I go? You can go when I tell you to go. John stared sullenly at the smoke rising from the brazier until Noy took him under the chin, thick fingers twisting his head around. Look at me when I'm talking to you, boy. John looked. The armourer had a chest like a keg of ale and a gut to match. His nose was flat and broad, and he always seemed in need of a shave. The left sleeve of his black wool tunic was fastened at the shoulder with a silver pin in the shape of a longsword. Words won't make your mother a whore. She was what she was, and nothing Toad says can change that. You know, we have men on the wall whose mothers were whores. Not my mother, John thought stubbornly. He knew nothing of his mother. Eddard Stark would not talk of her, yet he dreamed of her at times, so often that he could almost see her face. In his dreams she was beautiful, and high-born, and her eyes were kind. You think you had it hard, being a high lord's bastard, the armour went on. That boy Gerin is a Septon's get, and Cotter Pike is a base-born son of a tavern wench. Now he commands each watch by the sea. I don't care, said John. I don't care about them, and I don't care about you, or Thorn, or Benjen Stark, or any of them. I hate it here. It's cold. Yeah, cold and hard and mean, that's the wall, and the men who walk it. Not like the stories your wet nurse told you. Well, piss on the stories, and piss on your wet nurse. That's the way it is, and you're here for life, same as the rest of us. Life, John repeated bitterly. The armourer could talk about life. He'd had one. He'd only taken the black after he'd lost an arm at the siege of Storm's End. Before that he'd smithed for Stannis Baratheon, the king's brother. He'd seen the 7 kingdoms from one end to the other. He'd feasted and wenched and fought in 100 battles. They said it was Donald Noy who forged King Robert's warhammer, the one that crushed the life from Rhaegar Targaryen on the trident. He'd done all the things that Jon would never do, and when he was old, well past 30, he'd taken a glancing blow from an axe, and the wound had festered until the whole arm had to come off. Only then, crippled, had Donald Noy come to the wall, when his life was almost over. Yes, life, Noy said. A long life or a short one, it's up to you, Snow. The road you're walking, one of your brothers will slit your throat for you one night. They're not my brothers, John snapped. They hate me because I'm better than they are. No, they hate you because you act like you're better than they are. They look at you and see a castle-bred bastard who thinks he's a lordling. The armourer leaned close. You're no lordling. Remember that. You're a Snow, not a Stark. You're a bastard and a bully. A bully? John choked on the word. The accusation was so unjust it took his breath away. They were the ones who came after me. 4 of them. 4 that you've humiliated in the yard. 4 are probably afraid of you. I've watched you fight. It's not training with you. Put a good edge on your sword and they'll be dead meat. You know it, I know it, they know it. You leave 'em nothing. You shame 'em. Does that make you proud? John hesitated. He did feel proud when he won. Why shouldn't he? But the armourer was taking that away too, making it sound as if he were doing something wrong. They're all older than me, he said defensively. Older and bigger and stronger, that's the truth. I'll wager your master-at-arms taught you how to fight bigger men at Winterfell, though. Who was he? Some old knight? Sir Roderick Castle, John said warily. There was a trap here. He felt it closing round him. Donald Noy leaned forward into John's face. Now think on this, boy. None of these others have ever had a master-at-arms until Sir Alistair. Their fathers were farmers and wagon men and poachers, smiths and miners and oars on a trading galley. What they know of fighting they learned between decks in the alleys of Old Town and Lannisport, in wayside brothels and taverns on the King's Road. They may have clacked a few sticks together before they came here, but I promise you, not 1 in 20 was ever rich enough to own a real sword." His look was grim. "So how do you like the taste of your victories now, Lord Snow?" "Don't call me that," Jon said sharply, but the force had gone out of his anger. Suddenly he felt ashamed and guilty. I didn't think." "Best you start thinking," Noy warned him. "That, or sleep with your dagger by your bed. Now go." By the time Jon left the armory, it was almost midday. The sun had broken through the clouds. He turned his back on it and lifted his eyes to the wall, blazing blue and crystalline in the sunlight. Even after all these weeks, the sight of it still gave him the shivers. Centuries of wind-blown dirt had pocked and scoured it, covering it like a film, and it often seemed a pale grey, the colour of an overcast sky. But when the sun caught it fair on a bright day, it shone, alive with light, a colossal blue-white cliff that filled up half the sky. The largest structure ever built by the hands of man, Benjen Stark had told Jon on the King's Road when they had first caught sight of the wall in the distance. "And beyond a doubt the most useless," Tyrion Lannister had added with a grin, but even the imp grew silent as they rode closer. They could see it from miles off, a pale blue line across the northern horizon, stretching away to the east and west and vanishing in the far distance, immense and unbroken. "This is the end of the world," it seemed to say. When they finally spied Castle Black, its timbered keeps and stone towers looking like nothing more than a handful of toy blocks scattered in the snow beneath the vast wall of ice, the ancient stronghold of the Black Brothers was no Winterfell, no true castle at all. Lacking walls, it could not be defended, not from the south or east or west, but it was only the north that concerned the Night's Watch, and to the north loomed the wall. Almost 700 feet high it stood, 3 times the height of the tallest tower in the stronghold it sheltered. His uncle said the top was wide enough for a dozen armoured knights to ride abreast. The gaunt outlines of huge catapults and monstrous wooden cranes stood sentry up there, like skeletons of great birds, and among them walked the men in black, as small as ants. As he stood outside the armory looking up, Jon felt almost as overwhelmed as he had on the day in the King's Road when he'd seen it for the first time. The wall was like that. Sometimes he could almost forget that it was there, the way you forget about the sky or the earth underfoot, but there were other times when it seemed as if there was nothing else in the world. It was older than the 7 kingdoms, and when he stood beneath it and looked up, it made Jon dizzy. He could feel the great weight of all that ice pressing down on him, as if it were about to topple, and somehow Jon knew that if it fell, the world fell with it. "Makes you wonder what lies beyond," a familiar voice said. Jon looked round. "Lannister, I didn't see... I thought I was alone." Tyrion Lannister was bundled in furs so thickly he looked like a very small bear. "There is much to be said for taking people unawares. You never know what you might learn." "You won't learn anything from me," Jon told him. He had seen little of the dwarf since their journey had ended. As the Queen's own brother, Tyrion Lannister had been an honoured guest of the Night's Watch. The Lord Commander had given him rooms in the King's Tower, so called, though no king had visited it for 100 years. And Lannister dined at Mormont's own table and spent his days riding the wall, and his nights dicing and drinking with Sir Alistair and Bowen Marsh and the other high officers. "Oh, I learn things everywhere I go." The little man gestured up at the wall with the gnarled black walking stick. "As I was saying, why is it that when one man builds a wall, the next man immediately needs to know what's on the other side?" He cocked his head and looked at Jon with his curious mismatched eyes. "You do want to know what's on the other side, don't you?" "It's nothing special," Jon said. He wanted to ride with Benjen Stark and his rangings, deep into the mysteries of the haunted forest, wanted to fight Mance Rayder's wildlings and ward the realm against the others, but it was better not to speak of the things you wanted. "The rangers say it's just woods and mountains and frozen lakes with lots of snow and ice." "And the Grumpkins and the Snarks," Tyrion said. "Let us not forget them, Lord Snow, or else what's the big thing for?" "Don't call me Lord Snow." The dwarf lifted an eyebrow. Would you rather be called the imp? Let them see that their words can cut you, and you'll never be free of the mockery. If they want to give you a name, take it, make it your own, then they can't hurt you with it any more. He gestured with his stick. Come, walk with me. They'll be serving some vile stew in the common room by now, and I could do with a bowl of something hot. John was hungry too, so he fell in beside Lannister and slowed his pace to match the dwarf's awkward, waddling steps. The wind was rising, and they could hear the old wooden buildings creaking round them, and in the distance a heavy shutter banging, over and over, forgotten. Once there was a muffled thump of a blanket of snow as it slid from its roof and landed near them. I don't see your wolf, Lannister said as they walked. I chain him up in the old stables when we're training. They board all the horses in the east stables now, so no one bothers him. The rest of the time he stays with me. My sleeping cell is in Hardin's Tower. That's the one with the broken battlement, no? Shattered stone in the yard below, and a lean to it like our noble King Robert after a long night's drinking. I thought all those buildings had been abandoned. John shrugged. No one cares where you sleep. Most of the old keeps are empty, but you can pick any cell you want. Once Castle Black had housed 5,000 fighting men with all their horses and servants and weapons. Now it was a home to 10th of that number, and parts of it were falling into ruin. Tyrion Lannister's laughter steamed in the cold air. I'll be sure to tell your father to arrest more stonemasons before your tower collapses. John could taste the mockery there, but there was no denying the truth. The Watch had built 19 great strongholds along the wall, but only 3 were still occupied. East Watch on its grey wind-swept shore, the Shadow Tower hard by the mountains where the wall ended, and Castle Black between them, at the end of the King's Road. The other keeps, long deserted, were lonely, haunted places, where cold winds whistled through black windows, and the spirits of the dead manned the parapets. It's better that I'm by myself, John said stubbornly. The rest of them are scared of ghosts. Wise boys, Lannister said. Then he changed the subject. The talk is, your uncle is too long away. John remembered the wish he'd wished in his anger, the vision of Benjen Stark dead in the snow, and he looked away quickly. The dwarf had a way of sensing things, and John did not want him to see the guilt in his eyes. He said he'd be back by my name day, he admitted. His name day had come and gone, unremarked, a fortnight past. They were looking for Sir Waymar Royce. His father is a bannerman for Lord Arryn. Uncle Benjen said they might search as far as the Shadow Tower. That's all the way up in the mountains. I hear that a good many rangers have vanished of late, Lannister said as they mounted the steps to the common hall. He grinned and pulled open the door. Perhaps the Grumpkins are hungry this year. Inside, the hall was immense and draughty, even with a roaring fire at its hearth. Crows rested in the timbers of its lofty ceiling. John heard their cries overhead as he accepted a bowl of stew and a heel of black bread from the day's cooks. Gren and Toad and some of the others were seated at the bench nearest the warmth, laughing and cursing each other in rough voices. John eyed them thoughtfully for a moment. Then he chose a spot right at the far end of the hall, well away from the other diners. Tyrion Lannister sat across from him, sniffing at the stew suspiciously. Barley, onion, carrot, he muttered. Someone should tell the cooks that turnip isn't a meat. It's mutton stew. John pulled off his gloves and warmed his hands in the steam rising from the bowl. The smell made his mouth water. Snow! John heard Alistair Thorne's voice, but there was a curious note in it that he had not heard before. He turned. The Lord Commander wants to see you now. For a moment John was too frightened to move. Why would the Lord Commander want to see him? They'd heard something about Benjen, he thought wildly. He was dead. The vision had come true. Is it my uncle? He blurted. Is he returned safe? The Lord Commander is not accustomed to waiting, was Sir Alistair's reply, and I'm not accustomed to having my commands questioned by bastards. Tyrion Lannister swung off the bench and rose. Stop it, Thorne. You're frightening the boy. Keep out of matters that don't concern you, Lannister. You have no place here. I have a place at court, though, the dwarf said, smiling. A word in the right ear, and you'll die a sour old man before you get another boy to train. Now tell Snow why the old bear needs to see him. Is there news of his uncle? No, Sir Alistair said. There is another matter entirely. A bird arrived this morning from Winterfell with a message that concerns his brother. He corrected himself. His half-brother. Bran! Jon breathed, scrambling to his feet. Something's happened to Bran! Tyrion Lannister laid a hand on his arm. Jon, he said, I am truly sorry. Jon scarcely heard him. He brushed off Tyrion's hand and strode across the hall. He was running by the time he hit the doors. He raced to the commander's keep, dashing through drifts of old snow. When the guards passed him, he took the tower steps 2 at a time. By the time he burst into the presence of the Lord Commander, his boots were soaked and Jon was wild-eyed and panting. Bran, he said. What does it say about Bran? Gior Mormont, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, was a gruff old man with an immense bald head and a shaggy grey beard. He had a raven on his arm and he was feeding it kernels of corn. I'm told you can read. He shook the raven off and it flapped its wings and flew to the window where it lay watching as Mormont drew a roll of paper from his belt and handed it to Jon. Corn, it muttered in a raucous voice. Corn! Corn! Jon's finger traced the outline of the direwolf in the white wax of the broken seal. He recognized Robb's hand, but the letters seemed to blur and run as he tried to read them. He realized he was crying. And then, through the tears, he found the sense in the words and raised his head. He woke up, he said. The gods gave him back. Crippled, Mormont said. I'm sorry, boy. Read the rest of the letter. He looked at the words, but they didn't matter. Nothing mattered. Bran is going to live. Bran was going to live. My brother is going to live, he told Mormont. The Lord Commander shook his head, gathered up a fistful of corn and whistled. The raven flew to his shoulder, crying, Live! Live! Jon ran down the stairs, a smile on his face and Robb's letter in his hand. My brother is going to live, he told the guards. They exchanged a look. He ran back to the common hall where he found Tyrion Lannister just finishing his meal. He grabbed the little man under his arms, hoisted him into the air, and spun him around in a circle. Bran is going to live, he whooped. Lannister looked startled. Jon put him down and thrust the paper into his hands. Here, read it, he said. Others were gathering around and looking at him curiously. Jon noticed Gren a few feet away. A thick woolen bandage was wrapped round one hand. He looked anxious and uncomfortable, not menacing at all. Jon went to him. Gren edged backwards and put up his hands. Stay away from me now, you bastard! Jon smiled at him. I'm sorry about your wrist. Robb used the same move on me once, only with a wooden blade. It hurt like 7 hells, but yours must be worse. Look, if you want, I can show you how to defend that. Alistair Thorne overheard him. Lord Snow wants to take my place now, he sneered. I'd have an easier time teaching a wolf to juggle than you will training this Uruks. I'll take that wager, Sir Alistair, Jon said. I'd love to see Ghost juggle. Jon heard Gren suck in his breath, shocked. Silence fell. Then Tyrion Lannister guffawed. 3 of the Black brothers joined in from a nearby table. The laugh spread up and down the benches until even the cooks joined in. The birds scurried in their rafters, and finally even Gren began to chuckle. Sir Alistair never took his eyes from Jon. As the laughter rolled round him, his face darkened and his sword hand curled into a fist. That was a grievous error, Lord Snow, he said at last in the acid tones of an enemy.
So Jon has finally made it to the wall.
And he doesn't like it.
No, he doesn't, and no one else likes it.
Yeah, no
one
one
likes
wants
him there.
Mm-mm.
Lord Snow.
Alistair Thorne, we got to meet him too.
I know, he's great. In an awful way.
Yeah, I love him. He's always one of my favorites.
I forgot why he hates Jon so much.
Yeah,
but
I forgot
when Jon, talks back.
Yep. I forgot what started the conflict too, and then it was like, oh yeah, because he made a wisecrack.
Mm-hmm.
Which everyone thought was funny.
Yes.
But then,
getting good with the guys after Jon beat all their asses.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Broke my wrist.
Broke
my wrist.
It isn't broken. Just quit being a baby.
Yeah. But you had, Noy there, the Master at Arms, to kind of put everything in perspective for him a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, you've spent your entire life training. Some of these kids are farmers' kids who've never had to hold a sword or have never been taught. Like,
couldn't afford to hold a sword.
right. Like, maybe you ought to put it in perspective a little bit yourself and
Yeah.
see,
Basically, yeah, you feel bad for yourself because you're a bastard, but at least you were a bastard in a rich family.
right, like, stop feeling so sorry for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe consider where you've been lucky.
Exactly.
He knows Bran's alive, so that's good. He finds out.
Oh,
Bran's
yeah,
alive
he did
again.
find that
Got
out.
super excited about that.
Yep. And Tyrion did not seem so excited.
Yeah, they kind of set it up. Martin kind of set it up to where Tyrion's just like, what? Really?
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of adds fuel to the fire of Catelyn's theory that Tyrion tried to kill Bran.
Yeah.
So,
Did he?
did he really?
We will find out, I'm sure,
Yes.
in later chapters. Like, comment, and subscribe to hear the later chapters.
Nice plug.
Thank you.
We also got some more wise words from Tyrion, where he tells Jon, like, don't get so upset when they call you Lord Snow. Wear the name like armor.
Yeah. How many times does Tyrion have to tell Jon this?
Yeah, like, take what people are making fun of you about and cloak yourself in it and wear it with pride, and then they'll never hurt you with it. Tyrion's there to kind of teach Jon these lessons, which is interesting if he tried to kill his brother.
Yes, very interesting.
I think Martin also paints a good picture of showing us that the Night's Watch is not doing very well financially.
No,
Or
they are not.
they
And
don't-
it is not what you really expect. Jon isn't getting to go out on rangings, and his uncle is not as kind as he was back at Winterfell. As laid back. I wouldn't say kind. I mean, he wasn't like mean or anything, but
He doesn't treat him like... He treats him the same as he treats everybody else, pretty much. There's no nepotism going on.
Exactly.
We find out that the Night's Watch has like a fifth of the men it used to have. Half the castles and the strongholds have like fallen apart. Not
Jon
good.
and Ghost sleep in... Or was it? It was a torn down tower. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, I don't remember which tower he picked.
But I couldn't help but think, if there was nothing else I was jealous of Jon about, if I was in the Night's Watch with him, it's he gets to cuddle up with a big direwolf every night. Freezing cold, and he has this big shaggy wolf to cuddle with.
Yeah, at least he gets some warmth there.
Yeah.
No one else gets that. And if everyone hates you, at least you have your pet to keep you company.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So Martin is setting up that the Night's Watch is the last defense against the wall. And in the very, very, very prologue first chapter...
Technically, they're the first defense.
Well, okay, they're the first... Alright, well, you know what I mean. They're the thing that keeps the stuff north of the wall out, right?
Yes.
So, in the prologue, you get hit immediately with, there's some others on the other side of the wall. They're not human, and they're killing people.
And they're chilly.
And they're cold. And then we get...
Frosty lads.
Yeah, Frosty Boys. And then we get here, and it's like, the people who are right there to defend you from the Frosty Boys, they're kind of run down and low on provisions and men and stuff.
Yeah, it seems like the Frosty Boys are doing a little bit better than the Warm Boys.
The Brothers in Black. Jon also has a dream that his uncle is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out that his uncle should have been back, and his uncle's not back yet.
A prophetic dream?
Is it a prophetic dream? Does John have prophetic dreams too?
Maybe.
Maybe
maybe
not.
it's just a coincidence.
Yeah,
Maybe Benjamin will be back in the next chapter.
Maybe John is just having, like, it's his anxiety over his uncle not being back, so he's just having bad dreams about it.
He just misses him.
Yeah, like maybe that's what it is.
Anything else?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. The way that Martin describes the wall, he kind of almost describes the wall like he describes the others. Like that it changes colors. And it's blue, white, and then it looks gray, and it changes color depending on how the light hits it. And then John thinks, well, if it all comes down, the world is over. Is that foreshadowing?
And I like how they speak of it throughout the story so far, where it's like, it's sweating, it's, it gets high, it gets cold, and goes through all these phases. And the way he describes a lot of it, it's almost giving it human traits.
Like personality.
Like it's living. Yeah. It's a living thing.
The wall.
Yeah.
I think he does a good job of just kind of giving you a sense of the enormity of what the wall is and how it really kind of is this huge monumental thing.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah, the sweating thing was cool for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I think this was a growing up chapter for John.
Yeah, I think this was his first look at what the real world was like. He's kind of been sheltered within Winterfell his whole life. And now he goes out, and he's no longer Lord Snow. He's just some dude. Another dude who's equal to some rapists and thieves.
Yeah, you're no better or worse than they are, and they are your brothers, so you better figure out how to fit in, or they're gonna, like, the Master at Arms, I think, gave him, like, the best talk. Like, you better figure out how to make this work, or they're gonna kill you.
Yeah.
Like, you'd stop riding up on your high horse and take a look at this is the real world, bro. Like,
yeah,
this is how this all really works out, and how everything works, and then just how John takes all those conversations and really listens and takes charge and walks up to that kid and he's like, look, I'm sorry, but I can show you how to defend against that.
Yeah.
And, like, realizes, like, well, I'm here, I have to make the best of it, so I'm gonna make the best of it.
Yeah. Although he says he's there, but isn't it before you take the oath, you can still leave if you chose to go there? Pretty sure if you get sent to the wall, you're there, but if you chose to go, he hasn't taken his oath yet. Because I know there's a chapter where he takes his oath. Yeah. Or maybe I'm thinking
of the show?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm thinking of the show.
I think there is a chapter where,
because I remember it vividly, but I can't say it here, but
I don't know if you can. I think if you choose to go, if you can turn around and come back before you take your oath. I don't think they've specified that in the story so far.
Yeah. I don't know.
But if John decides to take the oath...
Because I can see if, like, you're just sent there, like the thieves, and they chose to go there, like, you got no choice, bro. You're here.
Yeah, it's either that or,
but John,
you face the other punishment, whatever the other punishment is.
John chose to go. There's nothing... He's not breaking any oaths. He's never taken an oath yet.
Right.
So could he just walk out if he really wanted to?
I mean, if he goes through with it and he gets to the point where he can take the oath, is that part of it? Like, will they tell him, like, are you sure you want to do this? This is your last chance to walk away.
Yeah, I can't remember if that's what happens.
I don't either.
Either way, that's gonna rattle my brain now.
Whatever.
I'll look it up after this. We'll figure it out.
Whatever, yeah.
But until we figure that out, you can join us next time to find out what Eddard is up to and whether or not he's made it to King's Landing yet in the next chapter. The best way to see that is to subscribe to the channel. You can leave a like on the video if you'd like.
Make a comment.
Let Let us know what you think. Can Jon leave before he's taken his oath? Or is he just screwed like the rest of them?
Did Tyrion Lannister really try to kill Bran?
Is the wall a living being? Is the wall an other? Just a very big one?
That's sleeping.
A sleeping giant other?
Will...
Oh, that would be awesome if
If it's
Martin
another...
did that. If, like, the wall was actually, like, this big tomb for, like, these giant others or something.
That would be cool.
And they have it, it's just breaks apart.
And yeah, that'd be awesome. I don't know.
Or maybe ice dragons or something.
Ice dragons.
Entombed within the wall.
Ice dragons. That would be awesome. I want ice dragons.
We're here like, oh man, I hope the others get all these awesome things so they destroy King's Landing.
Yes.
Wait, whose side are we?
I don't know.
Wait, are we the bad guys?
Are we the baddies?